You were at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Will the Dill, who says, "Rant about this city made us and hold back the night from the Protomen." So this was actually really interesting because I did not know about these two songs. I guess in 2015, Protomen released a EP that had these two songs on it that are supposed to be on Act 3, it seems, from the way that the EP is marketed. And they're both like 6 to 7 minute tracks. So it's a big, meaty EP in a way, you know? And it's interesting because I remember the long fucking wait for Proto Man Act 2. It might have seemed like nothing in retrospect, given how long it's been since Act 2, but like, it felt really long because they had made Act 1 and everybody loved it, and then they released these teaser tracks for Act 2, and they were playing some of the songs live. Like, I remember having heard Breaking Out like more than a year before the album dropped, and there was a couple others that had been released. I think Father of Death. Yeah, that was the Father of Death single, and so like people had heard the Father of Death and were like, yeah, this sounds fucking lit. When is this fucking album coming out? And then it finally did, and like it took a while to kind of grow on some people because it was so different from the first one, but I think it's better. I think it's way more interesting, just more musically complex. I like the weird twisting, turning narrative, and I just think it's really an interesting album where all the songs are a lot more different. And so, looking at this one, even though it came out like 4 years ago now, do I necessarily think that this means there won't be an Act 3? I don't know. Like, I'm really curious if these are going to have a place in a third album. Because I'd kind of given up on the idea that it was ever going to happen. Like, they did their Night of Queen years ago. They're more of like a tour band, really. It's like they go to a lot of conventions and big nerdy shit. And they put on great fucking shows. And they have a huge number of people. So I'm sure they probably... I don't know if they like do this full time, if everybody in the band is like a professional musician, because they don't put out albums very often. I can't imagine they sell that much, although they do sell a lot of merch on their store, it seems like. But like, and they go to a lot of cons. But like, I don't know. I don't know what their motivation is to like make new music. But like this two-part EP, um, it was definitely interesting. It was like more complex than what they had done before in that it builds like the songwriting structure has like a lot of moving parts. The songs like change a lot over the course of them in a way that almost reminds me of like Coheed and Cambria or the Deer Hunter, where like the songs tend to get really long and epic and go through sort of passages, but it's more subtle than those bands are, and it's very like 80s influence. Like I could compare it to Meatloaf, who I know would probably be an influence on Proto Men, even a bit of David Bowie, um, and like there's much more of like an 80s speed metal or even hair metal vibe to it, or like 70s, even like again like the Meatloaf vibe. Like it sounds very live, and like they didn't try to overproduce it or anything. They wanted it to sound like a classic band playing just like a technically complex song, even if like a lot of it is throwback in like the verses where it's just like chugging guitars and stuff. um, but then when you get to the end of the songs, you get like these big magical moments with some pretty good hooks. So yeah, I definitely would be interested in hearing these songs more. I don't necessarily love the exact like thing that they're kind of throwing back to as much as I did on Act Two, but I do love the way that the songs like get so epic. And my biggest problem with the second track, "Hold Back the Night," was that I don't really think the female vocals are nearly as good as the guy. Like, I don't know if she's the same one who sang on Act Two, but the female vocals are by far the weakest thing about Act Two. Like, I just don't think the singing is that strong. It just doesn't sound like they like hired a professional singer, but just like someone who they know who could kind of sing and would do it on their album and could be on the tour, you know. And so I don't know if that's still her singing on Act 3. And it's not that she sounds bad. She certainly can sing, and she's doing like a barracuda type, like her heart, I guess, type voice, um, over like these chugging riffs. But I just don't think she has like the grit in her voice to really sound great over the song the way that the guy always does in Protomen's songs, and like part of that is also because they write very like masculine lyrics about fucking riding motorcycles and shit, and he has a cool gruff guy voice that matches those lyrics really well, you know, and like the sound of the '80s metal. So I don't know. The vocals on that song, I guess, were just okay, but overall, I did like the song, especially for its ending, and I liked the way that they harmonized in their vocals better than when she was just singing by herself. So I'd be interested to hear more of these songs. Again, this is literally the first time I ever fucking heard them. I had no idea they existed. The artwork is pretty cool. That it has like an animated like album art on YouTube. Um, their iconography is on point as always. It's also very different from the other two, which is interesting. But yeah, it's hard to say what it would mean for a future project. I guess I'll just enjoy these two songs until there is an Act 3, if ever.